So first and foremost, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Partner Summit series for those who haven't been to one of these before. And here's a glimpse actually at our next two. On December 15th, Changing Workplace, which will look at how Enactus business partners have pivoted their working cultures. February 16th is Where's This Economy Taking Us, which will look at factors impacting the economy and what it all might mean for us moving forward. You can also go back and see not only past ones, but get updates on what we have coming in the future at enactusunitedstates.org/partner summit series. So hopefully you can take advantage of that and join us at future summit series. But first, I do want to say thank you to our sponsors. We have Regis Corporation and Rich Products. And in fact, let's hear from one of them right now. I'd like to introduce to you Shannon Gilreath, who is the Vice President of Marketing for Rich Products Corporation. Shannon.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to briefly welcome everyone on behalf of Rich Products. We're excited to sponsor this rendition of the Enactus Partner Summit and panel discussion on big data. This is a big space, and our organization, like many other, are capitalizing on the new technologies and rapidly advancing changes in this space. And we're on our own digital transformation journey. So today is really an opportunity to learn from other industry leaders and what's happening, the value of leveraging big data, the challenges and opportunities associated with the rapid acceleration and the pace of change. So thank you so much on behalf of Rich Products, and enjoy.
All right, thanks, Shannon. And again, thanks to Rich Products for sponsoring this wonderful event. Now, I just want to take a few minutes and tell you about kind of what's happening and what's going on with Enactus US. We're very fortunate to be able to host two in-person fall events this year. We call them our Fall Collaboration Summits, and this is where students get together and collaborate around a variety of topics between training. But I think the highlight for the day, for both days, was actually a career panel where we bring Enactus partners in to talk about that process of getting a job and what corporate cultures are like, and just a wonderful, wonderful discussion session. And I know it's one of the more highly rated ones. And so thanks to Enterprise for sponsoring and both Polaris and BIC for hosting events on their site. And if you're interested at all in hosting an event with Enactus students and faculty on your site, just let us know. We'd love to have that be part of our partner relationship as well. We also have two incredible programs running right now. As many of you know, we do global races where we have teams help to solve some of the key issues related to one of the 17 sustainability development goals. And this one in particular runs around oceans and our One Race for Oceans. And this is where teams from around the world will be recognized and rewarded for taking action to generate sustainable and positive changes for our oceans. We also have what's called the Enactus Entrepreneurial Exchange, and that's where students from Enactus US are partnering with students from Enactus Morocco. They learn together, they work together, and they'll be doing a pitch competition to solve some of the issues inside any one of the 17 sustainability development goals. So truly a remarkable sort of cross-cultural collaborative effort. So we're excited about that, and both show that global reach of the Enactus network, which I think is a critical part of why students, faculty, and partners are with us as well. Okay, so let's get to start with the event and meet our distinguished panel today. First up is Tony Dickinson. He's the president of NCMIC. I think that's NCMIC is how they say that. Tony began his professional career with Radio Shack and eventually became the youngest district manager in company history. From there, he went on to Wells Fargo, spent 11 years, eventually becoming the VP of Sales and Marketing for the 7-state Great Plains region. In 2017, he joined NCMIC, which is the nation's largest provider of chiropractic malpractice insurance. He joined as the Vice President of Strategy and Development, eventually becoming the president in 2020. And the most important part of this, he is a proud Enactus alum from Mount Mercy College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is where I'm coming to you from today. So welcome, Tony. Thanks for being here. Next up is Shimon Sandorowitz. He is the HR Innovation and Analytics Lead for ADP. He's a member of the HR leadership team and joined ADP in 2019 leads the company's efforts to transform HR for the future by accelerating digital transformation initiatives, developing more scientifically driven solutions, and leveraging data science to help leaders make more fact-based business decisions. Prior to ADP, he spent 5 years with BlackRock, leading the HR organizational research team. And previous to that, he spent 12 years with Goldman Sachs, most recently as their head of people analytics, using machine learning, statistics, and computer science to help the firm make data-driven people-based decisions. So welcome. Next up, we have Jim Young, and he is the Global Chief Data Officer for AIG's $30 billion general insurance business. In this role, he oversees architecture, development, and maintenance of the general insurance data capabilities. Prior to that, he was a Senior Vice President for Business Insurance Information and Management Analytics for Travelers Insurance Group. Jim also has been the Director of Business Intelligence for Allstate. Prior to Allstate, he was the Director of Professional Services for United Devices, a venture-funded startup software company. He also has spent time with Ernst & Young as the Senior Manager of Financial Services and started his career with U.S. Bank Corp as a financial analyst. So welcome, Jim. Happy to have you here. And last, but certainly not least, is our moderator for today's event, and that's Bob Parr from Kpmg. Bob serves as the Advisory Chief Data Officer for Kpmg US and was recently named the Global ESG Chief Data Officer. In this role, he will enable KPMGs in helping to meet the demand for ESG solutions. As the U.S. Advisory Chief Data Officer, Bob works closely with KPMGs to integrate a data-driven approach into their service and offerings. He's been successful in implementing the firm's first ever advisory data organization, focusing on enabling teams to innovate with and apply DNA to create new sources for value for their clients. So Bob, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Steve. I really appreciate it. And I'll just say to the audience, we are and we'll be tracking the chat. So if you have questions as our speakers are talking, you don't have to wait to the end. We certainly have a good chunk of time at the end as well, though. But I know it's important sometimes to kind of get those questions addressed in the moment. So, but let's dig into the session topic. So, big data is a big headline, but it's a big opportunity. It's a big set of challenges as well, whether it's data privacy, living life online, or even all the rapid advancing technology and architectures. It's changing every part of our lives and certainly every part of our organizations. And this session is really going to get into how people use data and how they use that to improve their organization's place in the marketplace, manage risk, et cetera. So I think it's a very, very interesting topic. Let's start with a kind of a level setting question, because big data is this term that gets thrown around a lot. But let's define it in terms with each of the speakers and in terms of what it means to their organization, and talk about what you're doing to use that big data to drive value for your organization. So let's start with Jim. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So I guess what we talk about when we talk about data at AIG, first of all, we view it as an asset and a set of capabilities, and it's not just data itself. It's an entire set of capabilities that need to come together really in order to harness the capability that you can get from data. So think of that as people. So the kind of people you need to take advantage of data, processes around it. So how you manage data, make sure it's of high quality, that it's protected. The data itself, of course, you've got to know where it is, both inside your four walls as well as outside of your company. There's a lot of data available either, in the public domain or that you can purchase, and bringing that together. Certainly technology is a big aspect of it. And I think, one big question for any of us working in the data field today is your company cloud native or not? And if not, are you on the cloud? Because that is a game changer in terms of taking advantage of the newer techniques and capabilities. And then insights that you get from the data. And then finally, culture, meaning do you have a culture that wants to use data as a strategic asset, that's comfortable with the transparency that goes with that, and is willing to trust it when it at times will go against intuition. So that's, in summary, how we talk about data at AIG. And then just more generally in our industry, insurance is an industry where data is at the core of everything we do. We sell and price a product that we don't actually know what the outcomes are going to be until claims come in later, and history and things go on. We all see that the climate's changing. That's creating a lot of challenges in the property insurance business, for example. And so that means that having more access to real-time data and understanding trends becomes critical in terms of not just making sure we're doing well, but making sure our insureds are doing well, that they're protecting themselves, and that our agents and brokers are providing the right advice to our customers. So I'll stop there, but that's kind of how we view data. It's a very strategic asset here at AIG.
Thanks, Jim. Shimon, let's talk with you. Certainly ADP is no stranger to data. It's at the very core of what you all do. Can you contextualize it for the audience?
Yeah, so hello, everyone. So first, I don't want to speak for ADP as a whole. We're a very large organization and we do big data and a lot of different things. But so I'll talk more specifically about the HR space, which is where I've dabbled in my career. But in terms of the question, how do we define big data? I like to simplify it to the most simplistic form. Big data to me is a lot of data, large enough to identify trends that would otherwise be hidden, and also large enough that it's not possible for humans to look through the data and find these trends, which means that you actually have to use sophisticated algorithms to find them. But again, it's large enough where even if you were to put an army of people against it, you most likely wouldn't find it because it's just too hidden and there's just too much to look at it. So that's my general definition of big data. And I agree with Jim. The word big data gets thrown out a lot. And it's more of when you talk about big data, it's in addition to what Jim was saying, the people and the processes in the data, there really is subcategories of some general terms like big data and data science and artificial intelligence and natural language processing and that kind of stuff. There is computer languages involved because you mostly use computer code to do that. And so you'll hear about Python and Ruby and R, and these are computer languages. You have algorithms, right? You have things like linear regression or logistic regression or KNN or random forest. These are also terms that are thrown around. These are more specific algorithms or approaches. And then you have infrastructure and tools. You have like Hadoop, and you have Hive and MongoDB. Those are tools. It's a collection of all these things really that enable what we intend when we say big data, the outcome that we're really talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many dimensions to it. So that using the word big is certainly appropriate. Tony, let's shift to you and your organization and how you viewing big data.
Yeah, you bet. Good morning, everyone. So I like to try to take complex things and make them simple. I'm a simple thinker, and as I think about big data and in our side of our organization, it really comes down to understanding as much as possible about each and every one of our customers and how do we help protect and grow their business. And for us, we try to connect these things all back to our vision. And we have a vision. You see it on the back of my board behind me of we take care of our own. And I'll relate it to maybe a poor experience. So we we insure more chiropractors than all other medical malpractice providers combined. And so as I think about the medical office and the experience, I think most of us probably go to our family physician once a year and get a physical. And I kind of dread it because one, you know, I'm not as tall as I used to be. So they tell me that during my physical, but also that I got to get the clipboard when I check in, and I got to take the piece of paper and I got to fill out all this paperwork. And, you know, my family history is pretty much unchanged. When I think about having a family history of Alzheimer's, I mean, my 3 grandparents that have passed away from Alzheimer's, that's not changing. That family history is still there. And so why every year do I have to let the family physician know that I have 3 grandparents that passed away of Alzheimer's? It just brings back those sad memories to me, and I have to do it on a paper format. Where are we at with the electronic health records, and how come I have to fill this out manually every time? And so at NCMIC or at NCMIC, we can't do that. We need to know the relationships that our customers have with us. And we also need to know what their future needs are and kind of be able to predict when those are going to happen. And so when you have the question around what are we doing to drive value with data, I'd relate it back to some recent things with COVID. So, you know, March of 2020, the world changes, and our chief marketing officer comes to me and says, you know, we're getting a ton of hits on the websites, and we have call centers, we're getting thousands of calls, and people are looking for things like, how do I protect myself? How do I protect my patients? Where do I get loan assistance? You know, in the finance company side, we have a decent sized loan portfolio, and they're asking about loan assistance, and they're asking about forbearance, and they're asking about how do we restructure our loans, and then they're asking about PPP. And so we took all that information and we gathered it. And so instead of, you know, waiting one by one to answer all these calls, we started to figure out how we got proactive, and we started putting information out there, and we did webinars and updated things on our website to help these doctors. And then instead of waiting for one by one calls on how, modifying our loan portfolio, we went out to our loan customers and our borrowers, and we offered them the ability to do deferrals and to adjust their payments and to do interest only. And because of that, we modified over 25% of our loan portfolio, and it was on a proactive basis. And today our loan portfolio is cleaner than ever because we made those adjustments. And then we started lobbying to the SBA to become a PPP lender, because these doctors were saying, you know, I'm not getting the answers that I need from my financial institution, and we need your help here. And so there's not many financial institutions that are non-banks or credit unions that were able to become delegate authority PPP lenders. And based on that data that we were seeing and the needs out there of our customers, we became a delegate authority PPP lender, and we started lending money out to our doctors, and we saved, you know, hundreds of practices, and they were able to retain many of their employees. And I have countless emails and voicemails from customers that said, you know, you were the answer to our prayers. And so I will always keep those emails and voicemails for 2 reasons. One, like how many times in your career can you be the answer to somebody's prayers? And then I also use that to prove to my wife that there's actually people that think that I'm the answer to their prayers. So it gave me kind of two wins there. So those are all just recent examples of how we responded to the trends and the data out there. And I think that made a real difference for our customers.
No, that's to hear how it reflects opportunity for you, Tony, and your organization. Well, let's shift from opportunity to challenge. And Shimon, let's talk. Start with you, and really, you know, highlight some of the, you know, not the opportunity, but the challenge of you know, all of that you highlighted in your definition to actually get it working within your organization. Can you give us some perspective?
So there's a ton of challenges, but first let me preface by saying, in my space, dealing with people data in the HR space, it's very different than many other cases. Just because we're dealing with people's lives, we're dealing with very personal decisions that are, data alone is just not enough. One analogy I like to use often is, you know, in financial services, for example, if you can write algorithms that can trade based on good data, you have to be right 51% of the time to make a profit. And if you're right 51% of the time, you're good. If we make decisions in HR based on data and we're right 51% of the time, it's a complete disaster. If we hire, promote, and fire people based on algorithms and we're right 51% of the time, we're done. So the accuracy and the precision has to be just so much more higher. And I really don't see a place where HR writes algorithms that do the things that HR does. I see it more as enhancing people's intuition. But in terms of the challenges, especially in our data, bias, built-in bias is a huge problem. And just to give everyone a perspective on what do we mean by bias and what does that mean? So I described earlier how, really big data and the concept of predictive analytics is all about looking at the past to predicting the future, which means that the past has to be right and it has to be complete. If it's not, if there's a problem in the data from the past, then everything else becomes a problem. Another good analogy that I heard once was, imagine that you have a recipe book called 1 Hour Dinner Recipes for Working People. And the recipes, the book is out there, the recipes get rated by hundreds of people, and you get all the data back and you do a correlation between the number of ingredients and the ratings. And you show a perfect correlation that the more ingredients, the better the ratings. Would it be safe to then go and conclude that the number of ingredients is the #1 predictor of how good a recipe is? Absolutely not. Let's come back to the title of the book, 1 Hour Dinner Recipes, which means that there's bias built in that the book only showed recipes that take an hour to make. But if you were to expand that and include all recipes, that correlation may completely go out the window. Same thing for us. If we're using historical data to predict the future, if we're trying to understand the profile of success for being a salesperson, of the profile, the traits of people who do well in certain roles, if there's bias built in, just by definition, let's say that our company historically had majority male in sales roles, and we look at all that data, and the algorithm is right. It did the correlations and it found the behaviors or the personality, so to speak, of salespeople, but they were all male. So what's going to happen is we do that to predict the future. Then female, just because male and female are different in many aspects, they achieve the same goals, no question about that. But we may go about it in different ways. They would all be scoring low, and that's a very big problem. So to us in HR, the bias and being careful about understanding what's in the data that you're training your algorithms on is really critical and an ongoing challenge.
No, thanks for that. I think you did a fantastic job explaining a really complicated set of challenges. And we're starting to see this more and more broadly in our clients, and the whole topic of AI and data ethics is one that even the UN is starting to look at, because there are algorithms affecting everything these days, and I'm glad you could kind of bring that point home. That's great. Jim, let's shift to you. So, unique set of challenges in your business. What are the ones that stand out the most?
Well, I think one that was kind of touched on a second ago is, and it kind of fits in this category of ethics. It also probably fits in the category of kind of emerging regulations. We're in a highly regulated industry. But at the same time, there's so much desire, I think, on the part of our customers and our training partners for us to make it easier to do business with them, provide a high degree of personalization to transactions, to give a really great price that's very indicative of the amount of protection and coverage we provide. And those things sometimes start to get into spaces where you're starting to get into like privacy regulation and things like that, because personalization and privacy regulation are often at odds. Because in order to do personalization, you have to know a certain amount about the entity you're doing business with. And so obviously you got to abide by the laws and be very careful about how you're managing that data, no question about that. But you also have to think about, when are you crossing the line and you're using information that, might be starting to create bias where you didn't intend it to. For example, if you're using data sets that would put a preference on us writing business in certain demographics, for example, well, now we're starting to introduce discrimination in how we write our products, which is absolutely against the law. So that's the kind of stuff we have to be very careful with. And we think about all the time is how do you balance this desire for increasing innovation in the industry and advancing the capabilities of data full circle into the entire business cycle without getting so far in that you're sort of inadvertently wound up in a space where you're uncomfortable at a minimum. And so we got to be very on top of those topics. So I think that's probably one of the things we think about the most is how do we make sure we're consulting with our privacy experts, our legal teams, keeping abreast of everything that's going on. And there is an unbelievable amount of regulation happening around the world in the data space. It's just a moving target every day. So I think understanding that, figuring out how to apply it to where we're going is something we think about all the time.
Yeah, I know our business gets into that a lot. Client confidential information is at the core of what we do and protect, and it is a challenge, and it's not just a federal challenge, and between countries, it's actually at the state level too, which compounds it even further. So it's certainly something that is here to stay, and something that we have to all be thinking about as we use, and I think increasingly buy more data.
Right.
I think that's another big topic. All right, Tony, back to you in terms of the challenges. What sticks out first and foremost?
Sure. So I think the big thing that sticks out to me is that it's big. There's so much, and where do you start? And so I'll share an example here inside our company. At NCMIC this year, we're celebrating 75 years in business, which is a fairly decent amount of time, but we're pretty new in the infancy to this data game. And I think I shared with Bob, Shimon and Jim and Bob that they've forgot more about data and big data than I'll ever know. So relatively new to us, but we have a lot of legacy systems. So, we started as a malpractice and professional liability insurance carrier. And we kind of grew that business and expanded into having financial services. And so kind of as we added each line of business, we either built a legacy system or we bought a system, and those systems are really good for their intended use, but maybe not so good at connecting together and talking to each other. And so an example, a couple of years ago, we added Salesforce as our CRM, and really good. Salesforce is great with new business and prospects, and when you're putting new information in, especially if you get the data integrity right, really good there, but maybe not so much on the existing customer base, especially if you don't have a good data warehouse and good data infrastructure. And so had to learn about those things. And as we built a data warehouse, you really think about the data integrity pieces of it. And so, here's an example. Our CTO, his name is Charles Herbert III, but he goes by Chick. And so you might have him as a customer as Charles Herbert III. You might have him as Chick Herbert. You might have him as Chick Herbert III. That could all be the same customer, but our systems don't know that. And so how frustrating would that be if you have 3 different products with us, but you're listed as 3 different people, and having those things all speak together? And then you want to compound that. People get creative over time. And so in my lending business, at one point, when they were gathering some borrower information, they wanted to put collateral codes in there, and there wasn't a good field to do that. And so they thought the prefix could be a good place to do that. And so think about the collateral would be software. This collateral could be agriculture, it could be equipment. And now marketing gets a hold of that and they want to do a marketing campaign. And now it starts with the prefix and it might say software. So dear software, Charles Herbert III, or dear agriculture, Chick Herbert. And that's how we're addressing you in the salutation to these marketing campaigns. And so that doesn't work either. And so we kind of had to really pull back and make sure that we get the rules of the road down right and understand the integrity piece of it and figure out how we get a good clean data set to build off of. And we look at it in 4 steps. So we think about how do you think, how do you prepare, how do you act, and how do you start. And so now when we're thinking about data, we're thinking about the use of it today, but into the future. How can this data be used maybe for what it's not intended solely for today, but into the future in different ways. So thinking a little more broadly, how do you prepare? Planning now for, Shimon mentioned some things like Hadoop and Mongo, and I'm not sure if he said data lake, but when I talk to our data folks and they use those terms, they say to me, Tony, if you have to Google that, then you got some work to do here. And so you got to be able to speak that language. You need to understand what these things are. And as a business leader who's not a data guy, when I was an Enactus student and I was going through business school, we weren't talking about data. We weren't talking about big data. And we were talking about, how to run a business. And that wasn't part of our education and our training track. And so now you got to prepare for those things, whether you're in data directly or not. And then the act piece of it, really today around training your teams. And so, the top tier big data architects, those are not easy to come by. And so how do you take your existing technology team and the existing talent inside your organization, and how do you reskill them or enhance their skills so that they can do some of this work versus having to go out there and hire and find these, expensive and hard to come by folks. And then the start component of it is you can't wait till you have it all figured out. You got to get going. You can't let perfection be the enemy of progress here. Even though it's big and it can seem debilitating, you got to get started. And so that's been a key for us, is being able to jump in and get going.
Well, that's great. And clearly, you've highlighted a journey you're taking to prepare yourself and upskill. I wonder if you could contextualize that around your organization and highlight kind of a trend that you're seeing, Tony, that around big data that you're really focused on, either an opportunity or a challenge, and talk maybe a little bit about how you're helping your people embrace big data, get them on the same journey that you were on.
Yeah, you bet. So I think one of the big things that we're all facing, probably everybody on this call, the number one priority for us is privacy and information security. I mean, if there's something that keeps me up at night, it's what if there's a breach of customer information, or what if we, have some kind of, what if somebody hacks into our system and then you have to deal with being held hostage for some of your information and some of those kinds of things that you hear these big stories out there that are pretty scary. And if you think about it long enough, it might make you want to crawl under your desk and be afraid of what the future looks like. And so privacy and information security, trying to get that thing right and to stay ahead of the bad guys. And the bad guys are pretty good at what they do. And so how do you stay ahead of that? That's something we talk about each and every day. And even our rating organizations are asking us about it. And the boards, really, has a lot of questions around that subject. So that's first and foremost, that's paramount. As I think about the future, especially in the financial services business, I think about things like distributed ledger. I mean, the changes with blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and how are people's payment preferences moving and migrating, and how do we, skate to the puck before we know where the puck's going, type of thing, because that's happened fast and furious. And you could wake up one day, and I have a payments business, and COVID's been good to that business because people want to use their card more often and they want contactless. But what happens if everybody goes to Dogecoin, and I'm not a issuer or a processor of Dogecoin, as I'm out of business. And so that can happen pretty quick, and think about that type of stuff a lot. And then the third thing, just from, Shimon's probably more familiar with this than me, but from a talent perspective, just thinking about social media and how social media has turned, conversations that maybe once were had as interactions, one-to-one, they've turned that into permanent records of thoughts and beliefs. And those opinions can become thought crimes, or they can, ruin people's careers. And so how do you mitigate against those things, and how do you make sure that some of these social media conversations that are happening, don't lead to destroyed careers and criminal charges and some of those kinds of things in the future? So that'd probably be the third thing that's on my mind from a talent standpoint.
No, definitely big things to keep an eye out for. Jim, let's go to you. What trends are you watching as big data evolves, and how are you preparing your organization for that?
Well, it's a little related to the talent piece. I mean, I think that all of us would probably say that demand outstrips supply in this space of data and analytics. And, it's not like I'm competing with other insurance carriers for data and analytics talent. I'm competing with every other company on earth for it at this point. It's pretty much important to any company. So we're all trying to hire the same talent. And you need a mix of talent in order to be successful. In other words, I need people that know AIG, that know where our data is, that know how the business works. And that's a very simple thing to say, but the reality is we're in, over 100 countries. We sell over 50 products, everything from direct to consumer personal insurance in Japan to, large energy commercial accounts that are global and everything in between. So you got to have people who understand that, but then you've got to have people who understand data engineering, data science, and all of those things. So and I think that brings me to kind of the trend I'm watching. Is the conventional way to do this stuff is you assemble these teams with a variety of skill sets, and you kind of build your own. And somebody earlier was talking about, you build the data lake, you build the data warehouse. At some point, there's not enough time to do all of this anymore. So the question is where are the opportunities to buy versus build in this space? And are there vendors now coming out? And I think there are, where you can actually leapfrog and buy some of this capability and use some of their folks combined with your folks and make progress. So that's a trend I'm not hearing a lot of in the industry, people talking about, but it's something we're thinking about pretty hard right now, because I think at some point, yes, you need to make your company data driven and data fluent, but at the end of the day, AIG's core competency is insurance and our ability to underwrite insurance and be the best in the industry at servicing our customers in their time of need. And yeah, we need to be pretty good at data for that, but we're not a data company per se. And so how can we use data companies in order to advance our mission?
Yeah, we see that a lot too. Like I think, the market for data is, not just technology, but data itself has exploded. And, we work a lot with ESG, and Jim, I'm sure your organization's starting to wade into that topic as well. It's entirely a third-party data. The information about the environment and our broader social economy. You can't get that just with your own organization. It's a broader ecosystem. So yeah, I think that's
right.
a great. Shimon, how about yourself? What are you focused on from an HR perspective?
Yeah, so in terms of sort of challenges to the industry, so obviously this whole concept, as we've talked about, is exploding. one of the things that worries me a lot is that there is a science behind all this, and there's a lot of very specialty skills that you need to kind of do it right. What worries me is that a lot of people are trying to do this, but they may not have the right guidance, the right structure around them to make sure that it's done right. And on the surface, it looks like it's right, but there could be some fundamental flaws. And the more important the decisions that are made based on these analysis and on the data, the more risky it becomes. And so I think we do need to upskill more people. We need more people involved to be able to do this, because the demand is just skyrocketing. But how do you control the quality? And I'm really afraid, and again, it's amplified in my space because the decisions are so sensitive. I'm really just afraid that we have a lot of people, taking Coursera courses or other courses in other places and thinking that they're great at it, and doing some things that can be pretty dangerous. So what's the balance between putting the right controls, but then not tightening it down too much where it becomes such a specialty that no one can ever do it, because you need more of it, but it needs to be controlled. And from an education perspective, I think it's just so important that the fundamentals of data science are taught, and they're taught well. So that's one of the things that worries me a little bit.
I think, I can relate to that a lot. Data literacy is a huge challenge, I think, not just for organizations, but for our economy. And you're right. I mean, people can, they get a little knowledge and they can run into trouble quickly, either from a privacy or from an algorithm, or even just drawing back conclusions and making decisions on that. So I think you raised some really great points. Well, that, I want to make sure there's time for questions. I know there is none in the chat, but let's throw it open to the broad group and give you guys a chance to ask questions of our distinguished panel.
I'll jump in, Bob. This has been fascinating for me. I think there's a variety of things to think about. And in particular, I'm thinking about the pace of change and how quickly things are changing, where data is coming in, and organizations have trying to anticipate that. But there really is, as was mentioned, you can build, you can buy, or you can partner. And because of that pace of change, I think you're going to see more partnering. And so I'm curious if you have, if anyone has ideas on, what are sort of the things the third rails of partnering, if you will, when it comes to big data. What are the challenges that you see with trying to work on that partnership?
Well, this is Jim. I can start with a couple of things we think about. One is just the age-old vendor lock. So if you partner with somebody and you get too deep in the partnership, are you overly reliant on another, on a third party, and or what you're partnering with them on is more complicated than your people can ever absorb, so that you won't be able to have your own engineering staff, for example, and you're going to constantly have to keep that third-party engineering staff around. And maybe that's okay, because again, you're sort of paying not to have to worry about having to deal with the turnover of those kinds of people, constantly trying to find those kinds of people. But that's one of the things that we're constantly having to think about in these partnerships is, when do you become overly reliant? And then probably the second piece is intellectual property. And how do you make sure that if you're partnering with somebody, that they're not going down the street to your competitor and peddling what they just did with you on the last project, and suddenly you're not really getting any advantage or capability that your competition's not being able to copy.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think I'll jump in here. For me, it's about, so there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle. right? Many of which were discussed there, but there's probably even more pieces to the puzzle. To me, it's about being smart on multiple fronts. One is understanding where is your own knowledge and expertise most important, or a must-have, versus something that someone else's knowledge may even be bigger than your own knowledge, right? So in this particular example, building cloud infrastructure. I don't know that my own personal, even my team's or my organization's knowledge is so unique or better than everybody else. In fact, someone from Amazon or someone from another company that provides services is much better for me. I don't need to know that kind of stuff. I just need a solution so I can achieve something. But knowledge of the data and what we're looking to get out of it, that has to be internal. I'm not going to outsource that to anybody. I'm not going to rely on someone else's intuition on what the data should look like or if it makes sense or not. That needs to be me. And so you expand on that, you look at all the pieces and becoming smart and knowing I'm better off outsourcing this, I'm not better off outsourcing that. So let me focus on what I need to focus on, because it's in my best interest that I am there and or people working on my team are there. Versus other things.
Tony, any perspective, additional thoughts?
I would just add, as I was talking earlier about the data warehouse. I mean, just the way that you share that information back and forth, and why we built the data warehouse is because some of these things can plug into it and then they can unplug from it. So I think Jim mentioned it too, but if you ever have to unwind these relationships, they can be tricky. And so when you have the ability to plug into something and unplug from it, makes it a little easier. But also think about the costs that's associated with it. So all these things have a cost. It's probably like building a house that's it's always going to be over budget, and it's always going to take more time than you think. And so people will sell you on all the great advantages, and there's plenty of those things, but usually the architecture and the building of it takes longer than you think. It's going to be more expensive. And then once you're in one of those relationships, if you have a partner that's charging you so much per seat or per month or per data byte, that cost can continue to go up each and every year. And the more reliant that you become on it, the more expensive it's going to get to be. And so really kind of hard to unwind. And so a lot of things you got to take into consideration of that buy versus build, but none of them are real clear-cut, easy answers.
And Steve, I'll just check in with you. Do we have time for one more question, or should we wrap things up?
We probably have time for one quick question. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. Anyone else? Okay. Well, hey, thank you, guys. I really appreciate this. We're gonna go back to the screen share here real quick. Again, Bob, Jim, Shimon, Tony, thank you so much. It's excellent discussion. I could keep this going as a self-proclaimed data junkie. I could sit and listen to this forever. So thank you so much. Big thanks to our sponsors. We heard from Regis earlier. Our second sponsor is Regis Corporation. They've been a partner with Enactus for 22 years and are committed to continue that partnership well into the future. They believe that supporting next-gen leaders has never been more important, and that Enactus mission is even more critical than it's ever been. Rising from the COVID pandemic has been a slow strategic process at Regis, and they continue to take the lead in creating smart and safe environments. And they do share and hold in the highest regard the same values that Enactus has of integrity, passion, innovation, and collaboration. So we thank both Regis and Rich Products for sponsoring the event, and in that spirit of collaboration that we talked about. As I mentioned, that we've got a full series going on. We've got two that are planned already and out there. December 15th, again, the Changing Workplace, with February 16th being the where the economy is taking us. So we're We hope you can make plans to join us. If you enjoyed today and want to see some of the past ones, because maybe this is your first one, you can go to this website. We have our past ones up there that you can watch. And so on behalf of everyone at Enactus, thank you all for attending today. We're grateful for your time and attention and the support of our Enactus vision of a better and more sustainable world. And thanks, everyone. Please have a wonderful day.